You may have heard about writers starting newsletters or email lists or things like that, and you're like, why would I why would I do that? Like I can just go to like my Facebook page or like my Instagram and I can already reach all the people that I need to reach. Why would I want to start from zero on an email list that's going to take time to grow and things like that? So that's what is going to be our discussion for today. Good morning, evening, afternoon, guys. Welcome to Arts and Offers, where we talk about trying to make that link between art, poetry, and business. My name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
How are you today, sir?
I am doing pretty well. I feel like I got a pretty good start on my day. I woke up pretty early, got some stretching, some exercise in, drank some water first,
Hey.
which is the thing that a lot of people mess up on. You start with coffee, or you start with some kind of other beverage, and it's not.
Or you just
really-
don't drink.
Or you
Or
just
you just don't drink anything.
Or you just don't drink anything. But I started off with water today, and I was
That's
just
it.
like, man, this is the energy and the mental acuity that people are feeling when they just start their body off right.
I'm catching it.
This
Okay.
is nice, man. How's your morning?
Okay. Wait, so you're a stretcher, huh?
I'm becoming a stretcher.
Oh.
I would not say like I'm a pro stretcher. I'm not like the most expert stretcher, but I'm like getting
Trying to
into
gump
it.
you up in here. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Okay.
Getting
I see
limber.
it. I see it.
How about you, man? How was your morning?
Not bad. Busy teaching, things like that. I had to, if people are interested in podcasts, one of the things I had to do recently, not for the verses, but for my teaching podcast, I had to switch platforms. I was using a platform called Buzzsprout. And one disadvantage of Buzzsprout is if you're on the free, and I'm on the free, your episodes only live for so long on the platform before they expire. Versus one of the things we talked about with Spotify is that you can post podcasts on Spotify without an expiration for free. So
Forever.
I was transitioning things over to there. So curious to see how that goes. And again, if people have questions about podcasts, we can talk about that again in the future. But yeah. Also, something you'll be hearing more about as well. Not as much on the Versus brand, but more just for me and my things. I just finished the book of essays. It's called Meditations for the Independent Poet. This was the book that was. We still
I
keep
can't.
the gesture
but I need
for the.
the. I need.
I'll
y'all to
bring-
know
I'll bring
that
this-
I'm triggering you.
the stream deck here, so we have our buttons. So this is a book that takes excerpts from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and applies each of them to a concept of poetry and business and the link and things that we want to be considering if we're trying to become what I call a creatively and financially independent poet. So not reliant on academia, not reliant on grants, not reliant on philanthropy, nonprofit, just purely about how can I make my own poetry offer for the world and be able to live on that, and a lot comes down to just impacting the right number of people, and so total page count, I think it ends at about 103 pages. So
Gets in and gets out, but it's
Yeah. Yep.
impactful.
And I was trying to teach people just about the process if you are trying to self-publish. So I'll be going through KDP, and which I've done before for the pronunciation textbook I made, and gotta figure out all the other things that I want to do to get it out into the world to help people. Yeah.
Heck yeah, big leap. I think that one of the really cool things about the Diverses program is that, you being the primary producer behind the Diverses program, like these kind of being your ideas that artists should, or artists, at the very least, it would be a good idea to start considering when it comes to kind of creating platforms for your work yourself. Is that you as an artist you as an artist is also you're also taking that kind of lead in that regard, as far as that kind of publishing and work. So it was really exciting to see new work being able to be produced from it, man.
And that's where the value of a book comes in, because I think that the route I could have done was I could have gone with just a normal poetry book first.
Mm-hmm.
And the question I was really kind of asking myself is, like, just honestly, if I added a poetry book to the world, I, I like my poetry. I think my poetry is strong. I'm happy with my
I
poetry.
like my poetry.
Yeah, I like it. And that's the end. No,
That's it. Goodbye.
I'm thinking about, what would have, like, if I'm really, really, really trying to transform poets' lives, I think that this book is going to have the greater opportunity to do so because it's a much more radical departure from what people typically do to approach their work and others' work and art in general
Yeah.
versus my poetry. I think it's going to appeal to the same sort of audience in general that I think poetry always appeals to, you know, which is largely poets. But I think this is something that can appeal to poets, but I think it can appeal to artists. I think it can appeal to people that are considering taking any sort of creative endeavor in trying to be like, I think I can live on this. How do I make
Yeah.
that work? And I don't think there's a lot of, especially focused on poetry, I don't think you see a lot of resources available for that right now.
Yeah. So, so I mean, I know you talked about like like you believe like artists can really benefit from this. I think this might be something that you might extend out like when you're asking other artists about like their work or what impact do you hope this work has, like let's say on the painter, let's say on somebody who has a paintbrush and they have a canvas and they're like, man, how do I want to conduct myself or see myself as an artist in this world?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is you have to decide who is it really about when you're creating art. And I think that one of the things that we see a lot with artists is that there's a mindset of, oh, I make my art purely for me.
Yeah.
And cool, good. I hope that never changes. Like when I make my poetry, I consider myself part of my audience for my poetry. I would also say that when I'm viewing my own art, that it's not purely for me as well. If it's, for instance, I write a lot of dad poems, so I'm trying to make, like, if I'm imagining an audience, like that's what it comes down to. It comes down to who is the audience that you're intending to impact. And if you're purely your own audience, then you make the work and hopefully it's work that you like and it ends there. But I think if you're making a business can't be focused on the owner. It has nothing to do with the owner or the creator of the business.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with who the business is serving. And so going back to what you were mentioning about the painter would need to think about not just about putting the paint onto the canvas, but being like, who is it that I really want to impact with my work, and what kind of impact do I need to do for them? And a lot of that comes down to identifying a pain point that you can attack through your art to such a degree that it changes people's lives so immensely that they're like, hey, I want to incorporate this into my life somehow. And one of those ways may be through a purchase, but there's other ways to do it too. So that's kind of the consideration that I want to bring people to, is to be moved not purely to create art from a, and I'm going to say this word and it's going to feel negative, but I don't say it with any judgment. Like, I don't want to approach art from a selfish point of view. Or maybe a way that might sound more neutral to people, maybe like a self-interested point of view. I want to approach it more from a selfless point of view, because it's not about what is my art doing for me, it's about what is it doing for others. And getting people to realize that, because once we make that separation between, I make my art for me, let me rephrase, I make my art to benefit me versus I make my art to benefit others, then we can start really refining that sense of other and understanding what is something that my art can do to improve their lives in a way that they want.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of artists that I think would benefit from that, because it's exactly like you said. I think a lot of times they're creating kind of things out of like almost like base instinct, like whatever kind of comes to them and whatever they're thinking or feeling at the moment. And which is not, it's not taking anything away from kind of that creative process. But if you're considering like, who am I talking to with my work, and even beyond that, like, what is it exactly that I have to say? Because I think a lot of times when you're writing a poem, you're not thinking, well, at least, and I'll speak for myself. So when I first was really kind of performing, and I would say like performing like for like audiences and things like that, I didn't really have, I didn't go into a poem with, this is what I want to say right now. Like,
Right.
and because I didn't know what I wanted to say, there's no way that I could really dictate or form who I'm speaking to, because like, I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm saying just everything or anything that kind of comes to my mind, line by line, and whether it's witty or you think, oh, this is a good line that's going to hit, I'm like, okay, but who is it going to hit?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I think a lot of the same lessons, and I think with the communities that this book is going to serve is going to hit really well, is because a lot of these same lessons translate regardless of the medium that you're operating in, because you're kind of asking yourselves the same questions, and for a lot of them you're kind of going against the same struggles, right? You're trying to figure out, man, how is it that I can do this as a livelihood? How is it that I can create the things that I either want to create, or I can be good at creating so I can create other things, right, as a livelihood? And I think answering a lot of those questions, or just at least forming your thoughts in a way that actually like aids that kind of creation. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be able to if you're not able to get all the way to the finish line, you can kind of go from point A to point B, which is like a mountain, pretty much.
And I think as we do this, as we're creating art to help other people with whatever they need the art to help them with, we can still also be producing things that are for us too.
Yeah.
You're most likely already doing that right now, right? You probably are working. If you're watching this, you probably have a traditional job that you dedicate time and energy towards, and then on the side you make your art. I'm not really changing that, because if in fact I'm enhancing it. So I'm saying that, hey, maybe instead of putting all that time and energy to your traditional job and then arting on the side, how about you create art that serves people, and then you also make art that serves you. So like, it's not the advantage is I make more art that serves more people, and I no longer need the traditional job.
There you go.
Like, I don't.
And that, it's so funny. I was actually talking to there's an artist in the city, Ayana Hill, and she does like a lot of like curatorial work, but then she's also like a photographer and a 2D artist, like and a painter and things like that. And one of the things that we were talking about was just like, when I left my 9 to 5, the thing that you don't really realize is that so much of your time and energy, both in a linear time sense, but then also it's like, if you're tired after a full day of work, it's like, what are you gonna really, how much can you really accomplish kind of with your passions and with your craft, both in intake or output, you know what I mean? And so it's like, once you've replaced that 9 to 5, like I think you're really shocked. And again, this is kind of it's a privilege of of a situation, a scenario to be in. So this is not me saying like, oh, just quit the job, like, but it is saying that there are other things that you find, not just with like how linear time, like how you have more time, but just now you have so much more energy. And also, okay, one of the other things that I realized is that the window of time that I am, and this is probably, you can get into some conspiracy maybe, but that window of time that you're typically at your 9 to 5, like, that is such a creatively rich window of time. Like the daytime when the sun is up and people are moving around. Like if you like, I went over to the Junto on like a Wednesday
It's like
at
a
like
hotel.
di-
Plus, they have like a lobby where you can hang out in. Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool here in Columbus. I went to the Junto like on Wednesday at like 10 a.m. and I was just in there working, and I got like a huge amount of work done, and it was like work that's like
Yeah.
like creative, like editing and things like that. But it was just like, yeah, I didn't really realize like that window of time that I'm typically devoting to this corporation somewhere that is not fulfilling work or
Yeah.
anything like that. Like that's such a creatively rich window of time. So you find all kinds of gems like that.
I mean, even with the podcast, we switched it. Part of the reason I switched it to mornings is because evenings, I'll be honest, I'm tired. I'm really tired. Like, and I feel like I can give more
Jeff needs
to
his
you.
naps.
I can't even nap. My body can't sleep. um, I'm mentally sharper during the day than I am at night. So having greater control of that. I think we probably should do an episode just kind of talking about. I don't want to say guilt, but there can be some uneasiness when you're operating on a schedule that's different than what other people are. Because I mean, you and I both, we're operating on our own businesses and things like that. And I don't know if you experienced this, but like I make my schedule any way I want, and I like that, and it's great. But it's like if I want to call someone and like do like, hey, let's just like grab, I want to take a break. There's not a lot of people I can call at like a random time at like 9 o'clock or like 10 o'clock on like a Tuesday. Be like, hey, you want to just like grab a coffee really quick? So much of the world operates still under that, traditional system of work. And when you break away from that, sometimes you can feel guilt or feel like, oh, like I'm taking a break right now, but should I be taking a break? I should be working right. Like, so like you can get in kind of like these like mindset kind of traps that are kind of based on a kind of just how like the capitalistic system has kind of ingrained for us that like if this is a traditional work hour, so I should be working.
Yeah, because it also translates to I think a lot of the opportunities that I have to do things that are creative. So, like let's say for instance, I typically, depending on the like kind of the size of the project. So if I have a video project that I know for sure is going to be 25 minutes long, I try to if it's 25 minutes long, depending on the gear that I use, it's probably let's say that would probably be about 75 gigs worth of like data that I'm processing through. I try to give that about like 10 hours worth of editing time. And that's rough. It might be a little bit more than that, but 10 hours is like a kind of a close kind of cut in. And that's before like kind of the micro edits or whatever like that. If I get done with like a project early or something like that, and I'm like, oh man, like it only took me 8 hours, and I have a really good product, and I'm kind of done, I might. And if especially, I mean, it's not today because today is kind of gloomy, but like let's say it's bright and sunny outside right now, and I'm like, man, like I could get out there and I could put together my next photo book submission. I put a call out, and like a lot of the people are like, dang, I wish I would, but like I just like work during this time of day, and I'm just like, why aren't you guys getting out? Just be creative. But it's also like I was the person a year and some change ago that was like, yeah, I wish I could do that, but I kind of have to like be in front of this computer logged in all day. So yeah, there's a little bit of guilt, but there's also like this like kind of liberation, and also it allows you to be an asset to other people in a way that I really couldn't before. Some like one of my friends, like they needed like headshots done, and and they needed headshots. They were like their photographer that they typically use like with their company like had some kind of conflict or something like that, so they needed headshots or something like that. And they caught, and like I was happened to be in one of those positions where I was like, oh yeah, I could put a quick pause on it because the thing that I'm doing right now is not due for another week or so, so I can kind of do something else. So it allows me to kind of be a little bit more fluid with my schedule. There's a lot of things on my schedule, but there's only a certain amount of things that everything has a deadline, but I am pretty good at working way ahead of my deadlines. So Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be kind of an asset.
Yeah. Let me steer us into our central topic for today, which is about a newsletter, email list, or things like that. Do you have a newsletter?
I do not.
Do you have an email list?
No. These are things I should have. I've been
Okay, so hang on. So let's talk about that. You say,
Okay.
you say these are things I should have. Why do you say I should?
Well, so I think that since I've been since I've been not working at like a typical 9 to 5 and like just been creative, I've been really deep in projects pretty much every second of that time. And I haven't been doing a great job at projecting who I am as an artist on a very consistent basis. Like all of my this is who I am as an artist shows in just like the work that I'm doing, as opposed to me talking about it. And an email list, for instance, would like kind of allow me to be able to like I can shoot out. I mean, I know a couple of people they kind of shoot out like, okay, these are my calendar dates this month and the things that I have open. They also just are able to talk about their theory and aesthetic as an artist, which helps people kind of buy into the brand as opposed to them just buying into specific work. And then also, if you run like a YouTube channel where you have, new things coming out every so often, you can give like a blurb like this is what I think about, shooting mini documentaries. And this is the reason why I love shooting mini documentaries. And then they'd have like, a paragraph or so kind of talking about that. But then they say, if you want to hear more, here's a video talking about like, that theory. So there's just a lot of kind of additional information that you can posit to people. But then also when it comes to an email list, it's like it is a separated space where that's not contingent on them kind of coming across your platform all the time, and something's coming directly to them, and you have a much higher likelihood of being able to catch somebody directly in their inbox as opposed to hoping that they come across your timeline, or you come across their timeline. That is. There's a ton of benefits. Also, just like a direct contact as opposed to, DMs, which aren't
Okay.
the worst, but they're not great.
Okay. Well, lots of things there that I kind of want to explore. How about maybe you start with that last thing? So you said you could probably even handle it from like a general social media perspective, where it's like, okay, so maybe you don't have an email list because you're like, I already have a social page. Mm-hmm. I can just DM people.
Mm-hmm.
What's the issue with that?
Well, I mean,
I could just make a list of people to DM.
It depends on like the context. Like when you say DM, do you mean like DM general information or DM like precise communication?
Both. Like, why can't I just like all the things I would normally do in my newsletter? Why can't I just message people?
I mean, well, you don't want to depend on that platform, right? So, let's say something like, what's a platform that I would, you know what? Let's say something like TikTok. That's a good example. Okay. TikTok is a platform that is wildly popular. People are, making crazy money on it all the time, and they're kind of building up their audiences. But who knows what could happen with TikTok as a platform? At least for, let's say, for like your like usage in the United States. There was like that period of time. It was like a week or so that essentially got banned, and they had to work everything out. And then kind of went into the new presidential term, and then
I still don't know what the future is. Yeah. Like it's still potentially could get banned. They just keep pushing back the deadline, but it's still potentially could get banned.
Yeah, so it's just like something like TikTok, and again, it could be for any social media platform. You know what I mean? But I'm just using TikTok because it's the most relevant. I think example, both as popularity of platforms, but then also just as like how temperamental it could be. So let's say you have 5 million followers or whatever it is on TikTok, But that the only way that you can contact them is through TikTok. Well, now you have I would say like you have this like this in it's almost like you know what I would say, it's like monopoly money, and it's like you got incredibly rich playing Monopoly, but now we're playing life and the money doesn't transfer. You know what I mean? Like now it's like they said we can no longer play Monopoly. Put the Monopoly board away, but you're like, I'm rich trust me, like I am incredibly rich if we're playing Monopoly. But over here, you're not. But if you take it over to an email list, which everybody is, I think you have to have in order to have a TikTok. I'm not sure. But for a lot of platforms, like you have to have an email, or at the very least, everybody is much more likely to have an email, and it's not necessarily as personal as having like a phone number, and you can kind of get messages like to people pretty directly. You can put something in the subject line, and you can have all the information there. So I think that there's something again, take them away from this large platform that's kind of temperamental, and take them over to something that is just more direction based directly to you, which is going to be that email list.
Yeah. If you built your following on TikTok and it gets banned, you can't access any of them.
Yeah.
Even
if your page, if the platform itself isn't, I've known plenty of people who've had their pages hacked, who's had their accounts blocked for one reason or another. So
it's like there's concepts, for instance, where or not actually happens, like shadow. You can get shadow banned because of the wrong post. You could get banned yourself because of something, and if that happens, because it's all determined by the rules of the platform. So it's not just that like you're playing Monopoly with Monopoly money and then you're transitioning. It's that you're also, when you play Monopoly, you have to play by Monopoly's rules, right? So it's like I still have to operate under the paradigm they create. Whereas if I create my own email, I can set the guidelines. Because like, for instance, if I'm like direct messaging people on a platform, if I do too many people at once, they may be like, hey, this is spam. We're not going to let you do that. We're not going to send out, like Facebook or Instagram might let you do that and things, so it's like, again, because I have to operate under their rules. Whereas like for an email, if I want to email, if 1,000 people sign up to my email list, 1,000 people get my emails. Yeah. They may not open them, but like, there's not going to be a cap on that.
Yeah. And then also, you could do some pretty creative stuff, man. Shout out to, there's this platform called Tonight's Conversation, and this was like years ago, right? And essentially, I got on their email list, but I got on their email list like I can't even remember. Like I be around like a lot of those guys. I still am. I don't know why I said that. You could be like I'm super cool with them, but I was on the email list, and every so often you would get an email, and in the subject line it would be like, I can't believe they're really trying to tear down the entire business. And like, that's a new subject line. And like, that gets your attention. At least you're like, what's going on? And then you open it up and it's like, oh, like the thing that they're really talking about is like, people are so excited that they're buying all these tickets. Oh. So it's like they get you to open it up, and a lot of listen, for me, that's like, oh man, that might be where it stopped. But for a lot of people, that they'll keep digging, and they'll be like, oh, that's entertaining, or they'll read it or anything of that nature. So it's just like, having that clear, kind of more personal, direct communication. Direct communication is always going to be much more useful than hoping somebody kind of opens up your app or opens up the app. And actually, a lot of people have the Tonight's Conversation app, but like opens up a social media app and is looking at your information. So
yeah. So basically, by having your own newsletter or email list, it gives you greater control of accessing people in reaching them. You're not at the mercy of the platform. You're not at the mercy of, for instance, if you actually make a post on any platform now, because they've all shifted away, everything's gone to the TikTok model of interest based instead of follower based. So on Facebook, unless you like curate your feed, you're gonna get shown posts from people you've never seen before, that you have no connection to. Same thing on Instagram. Um, Same thing on YouTube. So like everything's interest based now, which means that, for instance, on my YouTube channels, like for my teaching YouTube channels, that the two of them have about 30,000 people combined. If I post a video, I'm not getting seen by all 30,000 of them. If I make a Facebook post, I'm not getting seen by all my friends. If I make an Instagram post, I'm not getting seen by all my followers.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas again, if I send an email to all the people who are on the list, all of them are going to get it. So this is one of the huge reasons why you need to kind of create that off-platform base, because otherwise you're at the mercy of whatever the algorithm's going to deem you fit to show to. The issue that I think a lot of people have with the newsletter is they're like, all right, so I make a newsletter. What do I put there? And so I think a lot of writers that have newsletters aren't necessarily great newsletters in the sense of I don't really have an incentive to read it, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'll just share my thoughts. And that's great. I think it's great to have a space to share your thoughts. I would love to be able to pick people's brains on things and like see their thoughts on stuff. I'm not pressed for time. Like the thing is, like when you make a newsletter or you make an email list, you're asking for people to invest time in whatever it is that you're informing them about, right? But the problem is that we can't just add time to our day, right? Like most likely 9:05 every single day you're doing something. And it's probably the same thing you usually do at 9:05, or like 12 o'clock, you're probably doing something that, again, you normally do. So it's like people already have habits with their time. So when you start these new things, you're asking people to put this into their day at a slot that's already full.
Yeah.
Which is possible. It's possible to change behavior, but there has to be a reason for it, because people don't just change behavior on their own. Like when a client calls me and like wants to have a session with me about a time, that's my job on that first call. So I'm trying to figure out, why are we even having this meeting? Because you felt so compelled to change your behavior that you scheduled a call with me. Because most likely, if we weren't talking right now, you'd be doing something else. So I'm trying to figure out what caused so much tension in your life that you needed to change what you were doing. And so I think we kind of have to have a similar mindset with the newsletters. Like, what am I going to give you that is so valuable, that is so important for changing an aspect of yourself, that you're going to want to read this and change your entire schedule around it? And honestly, I think if it's just to read your thoughts, for most people, that's not going to be enough, I think, to create real behavioral change.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, what is the function of my newsletter? What is the change that I seek to make in the person that gets it? And I think you kind of highlighted some of the different functions of a newsletter that I want to touch on. So like you mentioned, for instance, if I'm a photographer, or I'm creating a service where people are going to need to schedule with me, so like the newsletter can give updates on availability. Okay, so if I'm trying to solve a problem and it's like, oh, let me look at their new newsletter to figure out what do they have available, because now I'm ready to make that change. Okay, cool. I can see that. You also mentioned like kind of like just giving general information about like my aesthetic or like my stances or positions on issues. That I think is going to be a tougher pull. It can work for some people, but I think that the number is going to be a lot smaller. Similar to that, you also mentioned kind of like a space to kind of just like share your thoughts. Again, I think that's going to be really hard. I think it's possible, and I think a lot of people do that, but I think that gets to those newsletters that you sign up for and like you never really open, because I'll just open it later. The other thing too is just like creating like a separate space where you could communicate with people. So then the question becomes, what is the value of the separate space that I'm creating with this newsletter? And that's going to take some kind of hard work and investigation, I think. It's tricky, because I think you really have to be honest with yourself about the newsletter. Because if it's just to give like updates on yourself, I don't know. I honestly don't know that for most writers that's going to be enough. Like, how many are you signed up for any authors newsletters?
Uh, Not specific authors newsletters.
Or like creative
Yeah, there's
newsletters?
like I have like a couple, both like gallery newsletters as well as like
Cool.
kind of creative function newsletters.
Okay, let's do this. So the gallery newsletter. How often do you open it?
Like once a week.
How often do they send it?
I think a couple times a week. I think there's like 2 things that come out a week.
Okay, so you're maybe opening half.
I'm opening all of them, but I have like a day that I would like go through and like just check, and it's only because I'm checking out like openings, or I'm checking out like kind of like what they have going on theme wise for like next month's submissions or something like that.
Yeah. So we're not always going deep into and I think this is part of the danger with like kind of newsletters too, because like even if people are opening it, how much are they actually, what's the read through? It's not just about the click through, but what's also kind of like the read through.
Yeah.
What I will also say about newsletters that can be helpful too is this kind of gets into the idea of like, why does Coca-Cola keep making advertisements? Why does McDonald's keep making advertisements? Everyone always knows about them, but it's that top of mind.
Yeah.
So the newsletter can be successful even if I don't get people to read it all the time, but if they at least see it, so then like they think of me a little bit, so there is also value in that as well.
Yeah. I think about that because I'm also there's instances where if something is happening or if something is going on, somebody can really quickly or easily reference like you as like this is this person's line of work. This is like this, and it's like even if you've already stated somewhere like, hey, I do this work. If you're consistently communicating with them, again, even if it's not necessarily something that they read and they're taking in all the time, like they're looking at their email. So even if it's not something, it's almost like that subject line in your email address, like in their email, it's almost like a billboard. Like you might not look at their billboard and be like, man, let me read every single word of what they got on this advertisement, but it's consistently clicking your mind like, oh, this person does this person does this person does this.
Yeah. Or like using keywords. So like for instance, so Diversus has a newsletter because I'm just getting into the idea of like, I used to have like an author site, and then I switched and I created kind of Diversus, like instead of having an individual page, like making the platform for a lot of these same reasons, because it's like, if I make an author page, like there's not, the reality is most people aren't going to be searching this, but like if I create an entire platform, now I'm giving people multiple incentives to kind of come to it, from different points. So like for instance, when we do it, we have a newsletter that's based on our calendar for the week, because we're building up to having a poetry event every single day of the week, so kind of as a way to let people stay informed about the things that are happening that are relevant to them, upcoming. It's not just a place like here are my thoughts on this. Maybe that's something I could incorporate as a part of it, but having kind of still that central focus be like, hey, you're here to stay informed of events. And that's the other thing too with making the newsletter really clear about the objective. So like for instance on the Diversus website, it says, hey, if you want to stay informed of our events, here's our newsletter. So it's that way people know what they're signing up for, versus if it's like, hey, sign up for our newsletter, period. It's like, what am I actually even registering?
Like if there's a driving force behind like this, the action.
Yeah. Or like you'll see people like, hey, like every week I give a tip on how to do this. Well, now there's a specific function for it. So if you're creating a newsletter, kind of thinking about what's the function, how's it actually serving the people that subscribe to it, and being honest, because maybe it's just something that serves you. Maybe you're just like, I do a newsletter because I should do a newsletter. Well, that's not really enough.
Yeah, I saw there's a chef that is actually in Columbus, and
Guy
he
Fieri?
no.
Flavor Flav.
What? No, Chef Hero actually,
Hmm.
JC Baca. He like so, but he has like a website and he has like this like email list, and he was like, and this was like maybe I think it was last year, the year before last, like where he was like kind of talking about like these like 10 dishes leading up to like your Christmas dinner or something like
Hmm.
that, and so like people would be able to like kind of get these recipes like directly in their inbox. That he like he doesn't really drop recipes all the time, and he's not. I don't think he's like dropping like his specialty stuff, right? But he's like, hey, if you really like this at the restaurant, then try this, try this, try this. And I think about that too because it's like you're doing a lot of the same things as an artist where you're like let's say as a poet where you're kind of getting people to you know want to select your dish out of all the other things that they could be reading and intaking or anything like that. That
Yeah.
you want them to select what you produce, and not only do you want them to select what you produce, but you want them to come back and be like
Yeah.
select it again.
Hmm.
And with something like that newsletter, something that's going to directly to their email, they're thinking like, oh yeah, like not only am I selecting it, but it's coming to me, like
Yeah.
like it's coming directly to
Which
my
gets
phone.
to, I know we've been going long, so I kind of thinking about closing out soon. I think we really need to understand why people do the things they do. So again, if we create a business, if it's all about kind of like obsessing over the people you're trying to help. Like really, like everything that you do is in service to that. Like when you write a poem, everything is in service to the poem. The title, the line breaks, the rhyme, if you use rhyme, or the word choices, the imagery, the stakes, the turn. All of these are in service to the poem, and it's the same thing with the business. Everything is in service to the person you're trying to help. So we can't just be making newsletters just to make newsletters. We have to be really thinking about how am I serving the person that is going to open this, and to do that most effectively, we have to understand what do people actually want. What does your person want? What's the pain that they're trying to solve? And I think we've referenced this before, like Maslow's like hierarchy of needs. So like there's food and drink, there's shelter. Most likely, you're not going to be solving that with an art. Maybe you are, but most likely for like poetry newsletter, you're probably not going to be aiming for that. You're probably going to be aiming for something that's more along the lines of uh, community and belonging, potentially relationships, or like for instance, like self actualization. Okay.
Yeah.
I think a big driver for people in their actions is their sense of community and belonging or affiliation and status. I think those are huge drivers for why people do what they want to do. So if I'm creating a newsletter, I kind of want to be thinking about potentially, it's just an example, what can I do that can elevate someone's status? So, for instance, maybe my newsletter lets people get access to premier events that have very limited ticket sales.
Yeah.
Okay, so like if you sign up for a newsletter, you get access to this event that everyone else is going to get access to next week, but you're going to get early access to it at a cheaper price. Okay, so now I'm kind of playing with people's sense of status because they're like, oh, this is a premier event. If I say I went to this event, people are going to view me differently, right? Or they're going to
Yeah.
think, oh, that person's so lucky. This is something I can talk about. This is something I can mention to my friend, and my friend's like, wow, they're really lucky they got to go to that. I'm playing with your status.
Yeah.
You know, um, or maybe I'm going to give you information that's really really interesting. That information that when you tell it to someone else, they're going to be like, oh, that's really cool. So again, playing with people's I'm raising your esteem in the eyes of your friends.
Yeah.
You know, so I think when we kind of think about those sorts of aspects of what we're giving to people in the specific pain point we're solving, that can help us kind of curate what is the actual newsletter that I want to create, what are the topics or the things I want to write about.
Yeah. There is a Okay, so I mean, it's kind of like it's an interesting dynamic, and the thing that I can liken it kind of almost like clearest to is like the process of like trying to get like a film maybe into like a film festival, right? Because a lot of the times the reviews and the things like that, like around like the film festival or like around what you're in, is are they're kind of like loosely based off of other people's perception of how they should feel
Yeah.
about your film or about your work or something like that. And I'm not saying that it's like frivolous because there
No,
is
there's
something
value in
there
that.
is something to having a perception around your work that is built off of kind of perception around
Yeah.
your work.
Social proof's important. It gives
Yeah.
you that social, like, it's like, why, why do people get MFAs? You don't need an MFA to write. It's the, it's the status.
Oh
It's
man,
the,
actually, so I mean, it's actually almost it is. I mean, it's what you do. It's what I do in like kind of a way as well. I mean, but it's like, um, if somebody goes and performs somewhere, and they get a recording of performance, like that's great. But somebody having like a recorded, well produced interview of them, you know what I mean? Like that's like, oh, somebody took the time to get
this
your
person
words
must be worth listening
must be
to
worth
because they
listening
got
to.
the film
That's
crew and the microphone,
Hey, listen, that's the reason why the podcast like industry. I think there's like a bad and good kind of perception around it because it's like regardless of what's happening, there's an immediate read on somebody sitting
Oh.
in a room with a microphone that like you're getting good audio, good clean visuals, and all that other stuff. Like somebody put there's a lot of money and coordination around this person
Yeah.
kind of giving this information, and so immediately there's like this like status that's kind
Yeah.
of added onto there. So
Yeah. Also, for instance, again, like I get the MFA, I'm now in the group of people that has MFA.
yeah,
There's the affiliation component, and there's also, I think with the hierarchies, like it's not like it's just one thing. There's other things that are tied into it too. There's also the self-actualization. Like this feels like it brings me closer to my writing goals.
yeah.
And I think humans have such a great ability to logic their way out of any tension. So it's like the real motivation why you do something might be for those lower levels. Like I feel alone or no one's like me, so I do this thing to get a sense of belonging. But I can justify it as self-actualization because now I have finally found people. I worked hard and I achieved something. So now I feel like I'm doing like kind of like, and I'm reaching who I want to be as a person. So I'm operating on multiple levels, right? I'm getting the self-actualization, but I'm also getting the belonging and stuff like that at the same time. All of that to say, the newsletter can be your way of helping people achieve the specific goal they want. And the goal people don't always understand what they really want or why they want what they want. They say that, oh, I want to buy the fancy car. Like, why would you want, like, on paper, it's a horrible choice. It doesn't make any sense. I'm going to buy a more expensive car that has worse gas mileage, that is, if the headlight goes out, I'm going to pay, three times.
The car.
I'm going to pay higher.
a car.
I'm going to pay higher insurance, and I'm also going to pay more at the gas pump every time because I'm going to have to use premium it doesn't actually. It might have a faster engine, but I'm not actually going to drive faster because I'm going to be stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
So it's like you on paper, the decision doesn't make any sense until you understand that people aren't buying the car. They're buying
The perception
it's the
that
like
is you having the car.
yeah, exactly, right? They're buying the people turning their heads. They're buying the fact that, oh, that person must be, belong to whatever community, whether it's like the wealthy community, like the racing community, whatever the community may be. That's what you're buying. You're not buying a car. The car is the tool to give you the other thing, but you're not really buying the car. You're buying the affiliation or staff. So
100%.
I think we really need to kind of understand whatever it is that we're offering through our newsletter from like multiple perspectives. What's the thing that the person wants? What's the thing that they really need? And then how is the newsletter kind of meeting them at that? Because if you just give the people what they if you just give people what they need, they're not gonna like that. Like if, for instance, if I just say, hey, like you don't like need the car to like get the status. Well, I might not attract the person. Where it's like, all right, fine, we'll give you the car, but included with the car is also going to be this. There's going to be a meeting with other car owners and things like that. So now I'm leading more into what you're actually looking for. You want the status? I'm going to throw more status stuff at you.
Yeah, yeah. There's actually permission to give an anecdotal story about my past.
This is always really risky, but granted.
Okay, so one of my first jobs out of high school, I got a job. I never actually worked the job, but I got a job. Yeah, it was Vector Cutco knives, and there's a lot of hilarious things about that whole scenario. But a funny thing about it, and this is also the reason why I knew I would be good at sales, right? Like a funny thing about it is that the person that was our kind of instructor, he he essentially kind of gave off this, I'm incredibly successful. We have these conferences every year where we go skydiving. My friend, he has a Porsche, and me and him are competing like about which Porsche, like is this, is that, all this other stuff. And so they're having this, they're kind of giving off the perception, but they're like, it's like show don't tell, right, kind of thing, which is kind of like what we're talking about there when it comes to like the vehicles. It's like somebody telling you, hey, I'm incredibly successful, I'm great, like, and like trust me, I'm the leader of my field, pales in comparison to just somebody stepping out of a Porsche and being like, oh, like I see what's happening here, right? But which all just to say, but it was just funny because like that guy, he was like saying all these things, but I realized like his suit didn't fit. And that's like a very clear, like, okay, like these are things that are incongruent with each other, right? Mm-hmm. Which is all, again, all just to say like this, there's a perception that goes along with like, whatever somebody is kind of giving off. And I think like in a lot of spaces when it comes to, how you present to people or how you're like kind of communicating with people, it's like, what do I believe I'm providing for somebody, or what service or what have you that providing for somebody? It's like that perception is kind of like it's irreplaceable. Yeah. You can't really. There's not a lot of things that you're going to be able to give back to somebody that they can kind of walk around with and be like, this is kind of like this status symbol in community.
Which is why I think.
Also, buy Vector Cutco knives. They're not sponsoring us.
They're good knives. the marketing strategy is
they cut a penny, and I don't know why they did.
But yeah, they're good. The final thing I'll say is that I think as we do this, I think we really want to try to approach it from not that like we really do. Like we have to approach this from a space of generosity and empathy. Because a lot of people, again, when they think business and they study kind of like psychology and marketing to get income. And I think we have to understand it's not about worrying about the income, it's about worrying about the impact. Can I really help you get the thing you're moving for? And how much am I really, really willing to work to help you do that? Because it's not about me, it's about where I take you or whatever it is I'm offering that I take you. That's what we're really kind of asking, in this case about newsletters, but about whatever sort of creative offer that you may, is really kind of focusing so much on the person that you're trying to help as much as possible.
Yeah. 100%.
Any other kind of final thoughts? Newsletters, why we should be considering them?
One time I threw a pineapple in the air and I cut it with a knife straight up. But no, I mean, that's pretty much everything. I think that there's, there's a lot of really great things that can come from having and distributing a newsletter. And also I feel like it helps you really kind of maybe like refine your voice. Like I don't have a newsletter right now, but there was like a point in time, okay, I'm dating myself, but you remember Facebook had, maybe they do still have them, but I don't know, like notes.
I don't remember that. I remember Pokes.
But no, so like Facebook used to have like these like notes, and essentially you can like put out. It's like if somebody is your friend on Facebook, this is a much simpler time, for all the youth out there. But you can make little articles, or you can type up little articles or something like that, and if like they're your friends, like you can just send them over to your friends, and they would get them kind of like as a post, and they could read them and stuff like that. And I did that for a little bit. I did it for about like 5 or 6 months, where I would just like either like make something new just about observations. I really thought I was like really wise. I was not. But I would send them. But it's also like I think throughout that process, you're also refining your voice. You're refining, like even your voice from the feedback, right? People would be giving feedback. They would say, this is I like this aspect of this, and it might not be what I'm expecting, but it is something that is helpful. And I think that if I was more focused on that at that time, I think I could have had a much larger kind of or like kind of beneficial outcome from it. But it was also to say that like something like a newsletter could really help you kind of refine your voice as far as like who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, and exactly what you're saying here. It also helps you understand what you're providing to people and what you're giving to people that is of value to them in their life. Also, I cut a quarter in half before with a knife. So
they had the scissors too, right?
That we didn't have the. I think they might. I think they do have scissors, but I never worked the scissors. I never sold anything. I just did the training, so they owe me like $170, by the way, for that training because we're supposed to get paid for that. So.
And with inflation, that's like $1,000.
Inflation. I pretty much own.
With that, guys, if you have newsletters, we'd love to hear your own experiences, your own thoughts on things that you found helpful or unhelpful in your own experience that you can share with others. But best wishes on your guys' creative, artistic endeavors, business endeavors. We'll catch you guys next week on the next episode of Arts and Endeavors. Once more, my name Arts and Offers. Once more, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
We'll see you guys later. Hope you guys have a good day.